Hey everyone, looks like we are going live here. Let me double check on Facebook itself to make sure we show up. So I know the one time I don't check will be the one time it doesn't work. And there we are. Awesome. So welcome to the show. I'm Jason Logston, and this is Makin Bacon. We're all about helping you serve your fans, grow your income, and get the most out of your blog. Today's episode is brought to you by the Food Photography Club. Food Photography Club is a membership site all about food photography. There are multiple courses in the program ranging from beginner to intermediate and advanced content. Not only will you learn how to create beautiful food photos, if you want to do this for a living, this is the place for you. Christina Peters is the veteran award-winning food photographer behind the club, where she is teaching everything she knows from her 25 and more year career in food photography. There are 2 live webinars every month on a wide range of subjects with over 20 courses about food photography, along with a user form to get all of your questions answered and image feedback too. You can learn more about the Food Photography Club here at foodphotographyclub.com. So you got a good domain from that. And on a personal note, I have worked with Christina in multiple capacities, met her at a lot of different conferences. She's spoken at some of mine, and she is just a wonderful, super knowledgeable person who has done more with food photography than the majority of people. And she's very good at communicating how to do that to the rest of us that don't have that experience. So definitely check it out if you're interested in improving your photography or definitely making a living outside of your blog by doing photography. So on to the show. As bloggers, we are experts at teaching people. And one of the best ways to do that is by teaching cooking classes. But learning how to start, especially when the pandemic has pushed all classes online, can be really confusing. Luckily, today's guest is the perfect person to help us out. He is a self-proclaimed engineering nerd-turned-inventor and an avid home cook. He's combined these 2 passions together to create Chibo, a platform that takes interactive cooking instruction and makes it possible online. Can't wait to learn from today's guest, Taylor Dawson, founder of Chibo. Taylor, welcome to Makin Bacon.
Thanks for having me here, Jason. I can't wait to talk more about what we're doing with Chibo.
I'm really looking forward to diving into what is your current expertise, which is teaching online cooking classes. But before we get started, I always like to ask, what is it like around your dinner table on a typical day?
There is no typical day, first of all. I'm actually sitting around what sometimes is our dinner table. So I'm sitting outside. Our house is about 1,500 square feet. So our dinner table is about like a third the size of this. And usually it has a craft. Right now there's a craft going on there. So they've been decorating pumpkins. So we haven't even been able to sit there. So we always come out here. I've got 3 kids and a wife, and all 5 of us usually crowd around here very quickly to get something to eat. And then we've got some other project to do right now. Actually, I'm building a he shed / office back there.
Nice.
Last night, I'll just talk about last night. Last night we finished doing some work on that, spent about 10 minutes eating here at the table, asked my oldest daughter to clean up, and then we went right back to work. So it's insanity. And that's exactly how it should be.
How long do you have the outdoor table privileges in
yeah, we've been lucky. This week has been phenomenal weather, but you never really know in October, but definitely November, it's not going to happen. So we'll be, I've got the pizza oven over there too. So the pizza parlor is going to shut down by the end of October, most likely. And then won't open back up until beginning of April, maybe March, probably March.
What are your favorite pizza toppings?
So there's, man, I can't think of the name of the famous pizzeria down in Phoenix area. It's slipping my mind, but they've got one with rosemary and pistachio, and that's by far that's the house favorite. And I love that one. But my wife would say that the margarita, just basic, is absolutely the best. And honestly, that might come in as my second best.
Nice. My wife loves pistachios, so I might have to try making that sometime. I don't have a pizza oven, but I can at least make poor man's pizza.
Yeah, well, get a baking steel. You're a modernist cook, so get yourself a baking steel, turn the broiler all the way on, and you can get close.
Yep, I'll do what I can. And as always, if anyone's listening, say hi, let us know where you're from, and if you have comments or questions for Taylor along the way, post them in the comments, and I will get to them. I'm really curious. A lot of bloggers don't treat their blog as a business that I found. And I always find that that's a shame. I have a background in web development, and I worked at companies ranging from large corporations like ESPN down to small companies and even internet startups. That problem solving mindset, both on a corporate level and a startup level, has really been invaluable for helping me maximize my blog. So before we hop into Chibo and online classes and everything that entails, I wanted to talk some about your background and philosophy, because you do a lot of cool stuff over the years. You've mentioned that you like to build systems and platforms that make other people successful. Why have you found that to be such a valuable approach to building a business?
I think it starts back with, I'm an engineer from the get-go. So I like to think about building things that can be scaled. Like when I first started doing engineering, the whole of engineering, modern engineering, right, for the most part, is how do I make something that then can be a component that can go in anywhere, so that I can design one thing and then it can be replicated a million times. If you get that down, then you've created something very powerful. You get a lot of leverage out of it. About 5 years ago, I transitioned from being an engineer to being, my title was product evangelist at the innovation lab that we just started up at GE Appliances called First Build. And while I was there, what we were trying to do was radically alter the rule book for how you innovate in a large corporation. And we employed a lot of the techniques, entrepreneurial techniques, that we learned in a book called The Lean Startup by a guy named Eric Ries. It's a guy named Steve Blank who heavily influenced that thought process as well. And what I realized when we were there was, if you're trying to innovate and grow something big, there's a different set of tools you can use. And so once we started to apply that rule book, I started to see, hey, that rule book could be applied within large corporations at scale for you to grow ventures. So what we do at GE Appliances now is we use some of those things we've learned there, and we're trying to make it possible for us to not just have one thing that we launch, but launch many things. So expanding that out even further, our philosophy behind Chibo and the other businesses that we've built is build them as platforms. A platform being a place that has the right set of governance criteria to allow someone else to create their business on top of it. So, and a good example for Chibo is, we wanted to create Chibo when it came down to it. We wanted to make a place where someone who's trying to grow a business would have all of the tools and all of the access to a network that would make it possible for them to effectively grow the business. So we use platform thinking a lot in how we structure the features that we put on our platform.
I like that concept too, because even though it's talking about creating businesses, really as food bloggers, we are building systems and platforms to make other people successful. We are putting together cookbooks or recipe guides or even single recipes that is a system to let our followers and fans be successful in what we're trying to teach them. So I thought that was a real interesting kind of overlap from a large corporate standpoint down to even something as simple as a recipe.
I don't know your background. You kind of talk like you're an engineer. Is that accurate?
Before my food blogger transition about 10 years ago, I did website development for about 15, 20 years, mainly front end and database work in Ruby and PHP.
That makes sense. So yeah.
I have a minor in business, so I've always been interested in business and loved working at some of the startups, and even at ESPN, learned a lot about how to serve a passionate fan base. I've also found a lot of overlap in creating recipes and creating business solutions. The same process of trying to solve a problem, whether that's to make the perfect sourdough bread or develop an online platform for all food bloggers to be able to connect with their fans. Then a lot of times I think we fall short of what our grandiose goal is, and then you keep trying again and again. Have you found similar similarities in the creation of business as well?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that as difficult as it is to create a vibrant platform for food bloggers so that they can make money on it, I think I'd almost rather tackle that challenge than making a perfect loaf of sourdough. My wife is actually really good at sourdough. I have not achieved her prowess. But one of the things that was missing in my career before I started working on building these new platforms, that has been really gratifying about what I do now is there was always an infusion of creativity, but it was always kind of bounded, like how far can you go outside of a particular box? And that is just almost the nature of the way that corporations work. I've always worked for large corporations. I worked for Lexmark for a while as an engineer designing toner cartridges. And then I came to GE Appliances, worked at GE Appliances, designing refrigerators and parts for refrigerators. And, you know, as engineers, we are very, very, we understand our constraints and we like to operate. We like to have constraints. They drive us forward.
Yep.
And since I've started working on creating these new ventures for GE Appliances, I've gained a lot of appreciation for being able to start with a blank canvas and the additional challenges that come with as you start to take away constraints. My experience is that as soon as you start to take away constraints, it feels like you're walking on a tightrope, and it can start to get a bit scary. A better analogy, like I'm sitting on my deck right now that I built. And when I started building my deck, I'm mechanical engineering, but I don't know anything about how or framing or anything like that. And so the first time I tried to design it, my design was horrendous. And I showed it to someone and they said, "You're missing this, this, and this." And then I tried to design it again and it was still bad. It took 4 tries to get it right. And as engineers, we're not used to that level of freedom to create things. Because we usually operate kind of in the lane that we're used to. And the thing I've enjoyed and the challenge I think that I've appreciated with the type of work that we do now is we create something, in the case of online cooking instruction, that's interactive in real time. I fully expected when we started this in 2019 that it would exist, that we would find something out there. Because usually when you have a good idea, that good idea has already been exploited by someone else. That's practically always the case. So the first thing you do is you go and do a Google search and you spend a day just trying to find who's done what. And I fully expected we would find that someone had already done the work. And it was my absolute shock when we found out that there was literally one other website we could find where someone was doing live interactive cooking. And it was a very small footprint. So to go back to the deck analogy, we definitely, when you're operating in totally free open space that you know very little about, the best thing you can do is put your foot forward and, get something out into the world, test it out. And what you should expect is that it's going to be terrible. First iteration of it is going to be bad. But if you don't take the first leap, then you're missing out. And the thing I've come to appreciate about the creative process is part of creation is creating something that's not great and then knowing that you're going to destroy it and create something better to replace it. And that so with my sourdough efforts as well, every sourdough I've ever made is horrendous. So
they make perfect doorstops. Yeah, I think it's fascinating when it comes to constraints, how much easier it does make things. A lot of food bloggers are like, well, it's hard to niche down because then how will I come up with recipes when I have to come up in such a limited band? And it makes everything so much easier, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If you tell me to come up.
Sometimes you have to create your own constraints that just wouldn't even be naturally imposed because you got to figure out how to move forward. When we first started, the analogy that we started with was, well, what if there was like something kind of like Peloton for cooking? And then as soon as we started that Peloton for cooking analogy, it created so many problems because Peloton is, so number one, it's an exercise platform. Some people exercise, twice a day. And it was hard to imagine if we're doing a cook along thing, that people are going to want to join twice a day. So it's something that they do all the time. Number two, when you're doing a Peloton, you throw your gym shorts on and your shoes, you get on a bike and you cycle. With cooking, there can be a lot of prep that goes into it. I know there's more to cycling than just moving your legs, but you can join a Peloton class in the middle and still get a lot out of it. You can't join a cooking class in the middle and get much out of it. You have to have the ingredients on hand. So there were a number of things that as much as we loved the idea of this analogy of the Peloton of cooking, we found that the analogy broke down practically immediately. and we looked at the number of variables that you could tweak in order to make this experience good. And we said, if you look at the number, I'm an engineer, so there's a combinatorics problem here, but how many different combinations of experiences could you create with a different number of variables that you had? And, it turns out that you could create millions of different approaches to how you would do this. And so we had to pare it down and just make what you end up doing in that world is you have to make informed design decisions. And we like to move forward assuming, establishing a hypothesis and say, okay, let's assume that this is true. Let's build a low fidelity version of this thing, and then let's test it out and find out if it works. And I will say that a lot of our early assumptions were very wrong, and we had to adjust them on the fly. So the way that we actually set up when we first started doing Chibo classes was we hired a couple of local chefs that would switch off week after week. And we said, we're just going to commit to doing one class every single week. We're going to establish a hypothesis for what we're going to try and achieve this week for what we think is going to make a great experience this week. And then the day after it, we're going to meet, we're going to tweak it. We're going to then start designing on the Monday of the next week. We're going to start designing the next week's experiment, run the class again on Thursday, and so forth. And so we had a weekly rhythm, and every single week we would adjust something until we got, after about 10 or 12 weeks of mostly hell. I mean, it was rough. We had really tough experiences. After 10 or 12 weeks of that, we're like, okay, now we're starting to see our way towards something that could be a really compelling interactive cooking experience. Of course, we were trying to build something that could have some level of scalability as well. So you can definitely hop on Zoom and with 5 or 10 people and have a good cooking experience if you know how to prep for it and you know how to frame it. And a lot of people could kind of figure that out. The question is really, if you're trying to figure out how to monetize this, do it on a regular basis and then scale it up so that, after you get 10 people, you get all those 10 people to come back the next time and you get 10 more people. Pretty soon, and this is no exaggeration, you're going to have 100 people or 150 people who want to join this event. How do you do that on Zoom?
Yep.
And there are convoluted tricks that you can use to do it, but the experience on Zoom is never going to be great because it's a video conferencing software. It's not an interactive instruction platform.
Yep. I love your concept of tearing things down and building them with the thought that what you're building is not going to be the final product. And it's something that I preach about a lot, is that I teach people how to create cookbooks or how to put out products for their blogs, get them out of their comfort zone. And a lot of people say, well, I don't know exactly what I want the cookbook to look like, but I want it to be, 250 pages or something. I'm like, why don't you do something smaller first? Something that's easy, that's 20 recipes from your blog, put it together, and you are going to learn so much during that process that then when you can do your full cookbook, you're going to know so much more about what you want, how it comes together, and you'll be so much better informed than you were just the first time you try to do something. It never turns out like you like.
Yeah, that reminds me of Tim Ferriss when he was coming up with the name for his book, The 4-Hour Workweek. As I recall, he did something like, he just basically tweeted out 3 different titles. And the first title he came up with was, I can't even remember what it was. He talks about it from time to time, but it was a terrible title. And as he iterated, he came up with a title. That's the reason why he sold the book. It's just a great title. It's not a very good book.
Yeah. He also recommends, doing he did a lot of AdWords, I think, research. So he would put it out and just change the title and see what books people would click on to buy.
Yep.
We have a question here. Gary wants to know, what other platforms has GE built? Any notable successes or failures?
Yeah, well, I'll talk about my experiences directly. So I work for GE Appliances. GE Appliances used to be actually attached to GE Corporate. Of course, that's where we get our legacy name from. We're actually owned by a company called Haier. That's a Chinese company. And now that's actually very good news. So the great thing is it puts GE Appliances as part of the largest global appliance company in the world, and puts what our mission is as front and center and very well aligned with the mission of the larger company. It just so happens actually that Haier is an incredibly innovative company. They're one of the most innovative companies in China. And I got involved in this new platform creation space because as an engineer, I was looking for something new to do. And I liked the idea of um, getting very close to the consumer and understanding what consumers needed. So I was looking to go into product management. Well, turns out I did my MBA, and after I finished my MBA, I said, "What can I do with this?" And I guess I didn't really know what I was going to do with it. I ended up in the office of the chief technology officer, and he said, "Well, why don't you go and be the product guy?" Which is something that I wanted to do for First Build. So First Build is that innovation lab for GE appliances, and I was one of the first 4 or 5 people on the team. So I kind of helped define what that was going to be. So at First Build, we were focused on building. We were focused on how we could very rapidly validate that a new product should exist, whether it's a software product or a physical product. And so we spent about, this doesn't directly answer the platform question, but I think it gets to it in a kind of a roundabout way. For the first year, we really struggled. So what we were basically a bunch of engineers with a marketing person or two kind of attached to it. And the engineers were trying to figure out how do we turn this R&D shop that's got physical product that's really interesting into an engine for product validation through making the product available for sale to the public in a very short amount of time. What we wanted to do was avoid spending too much money on the product, on development of the product itself. In the product development world, like, you can spend millions, tens of millions of dollars on developing a product, all this, and then 4 years later get the product out into the world and find out that no one wants it. So
yeah, the faster you can figure out that no one wants it, the better, because it saves you a lot of money.
And it turns out that by having that ingrained in the culture means that you end up being pretty risk averse, because you know that you have to have a hit. Everyone wants a hit. The engineers want a hit. The marketers want a hit. The product managers want a hit. The executives want a hit, because if they have a miss, any miss is a massive miss. So what we thought was, okay, if we create a lightweight process that allows us to validate these products very quickly, then we will be able to get some of the more innovative stuff out into the world. So before we got onto this, we were talking about sous vide. I know your audience is, your audience is food bloggers, so they probably know quite a bit about it. And in particular, you have an audience that's into modernist cooking. So one of the first products we launched that was successful, we had a lot of failures as engineers. Engineers don't know how to market products. One of the things that I underestimated as an engineer was how important it is to have marketers who have experience. So we had a lot of misses. One of our first successes was something called the Paragon induction cooktop. Yep. The interesting thing about that was not so much the product. It was a sous vide product that could do sous vide on a cooktop, but I won't get into that. We actually launched that product through crowdfunding. Now, a lot of people would say, why is GE Appliances crowdfunding? Kickstarter and Indiegogo are for entrepreneurs who are trying to get their first $10,000, and GE Appliances, $10,000 is not something we need. The reason why was not we were looking for the money, we were looking for the validation. And so the reason why this is a great answer to that platform question is because that singular act of using this new channel to get a product to market has actually spawned a movement within the company to rethink how we approach sales of our products. So First Build now uses as one of their key approaches to launching product, using crowdfunding or pre-market sales, which is something that actually we did that before Tesla, right? GE Appliances was doing that before Tesla was pre-selling vehicles. No one really thought you could pre-sell an appliance. That's not something that was happening. We were selling product that cost $500 a year or 18 months in advance of delivery. And so that now has actually become integrated into the GE Appliances way of doing things. So I think that's a good example. Another really good example, I don't want to go too far into this if we have other things to talk about, so I'll just stop here and you can continue asking questions. One of the things we believed very firmly when we started First Build was that good ideas could come from anywhere. When you look at the typical large corporations that do R&D, they're very, very secretive about how they do their R&D. And of course, they pay people to a lot of money to be experts in developing product. And so usually what that means is we highly value the things we create that we try and protect them. And we protect them with patents, and we protect them with chain link fences and badge readers and NDAs and penalties that we say people are going to have to suffer if they ever tell anyone. And there are some important reasons to do that, but it also tends to create a culture of something that's often said is not invented here, right? What we invent is cool. Whatever comes from anywhere else is not cool because they don't know what they're talking about. So one of the things we tried to turn on its head was that idea that things were only valuable if we had invented them. And so at First Build, we had a platform where we would do community engagement. And the promise was, we're going to work alongside you to help develop the products that you think are important. So we tried to attract home enthusiasts and engineers and all those people and try and make a place where everyone who had an interest in creating new great experiences at home would be able to coalesce. We also had a virtual platform, online platform, where people could submit ideas and they would get paid for ideas and so forth. If you ever heard of Corky, an old business model that was run by a guy named Ben Kaufman, it was very similar to that type of an idea. And so the next thing I did after First Build was we actually took that idea to the next level, and we said, there's value in what we call, so I talked about crowdfunding before. That's where you get a bunch of people to pre-purchase a product. There's a value in crowdsourcing ideas, and we think that we can create a platform where people can input into the next product that not just G Appliances, but that any company could create. And so Giddy was the next business that we created after that, and it was designed to be a platform for co-creation for the broad world. So I mentioned that because I did mention some successes before, and Giddy is no longer. So you can draw your own, I won't say what happened, but you can draw your own conclusions about what happened. That model didn't quite work the way that we had hoped it would. So
cool. Have some of your fan club on here. We have Ari saying "Go Taylor." We got Abby saying hi. I have to say, for those listening, I did my first Chibo class last week, and I worked with Abby and David, and both of them were unfailingly great to work with. And I asked about 50 questions, I think, over 2 weeks, and they answered each one with making sure that I didn't feel like the pain in the butt that I know that I was being by asking a lot of small stuff. So I'm a big fan of your team that you've been putting together. And what is it like to come up with an idea? I think food bloggers run into this a lot as they start looking at delegating and trying to find people to help them with their work. What's it like relying on other people to kind of, here's my vision, now it's up to you to make my baby a reality?
Well, it turns out that fortunately, the majority of the team I'm working with now, I've been working with for quite a while. So we know each other quite well. We all know each other's strengths. And so while my title is Founder of Chibo, it's actually been the whole team has been necessary. So I've got technical depth in designing toner cartridges. I can design parts for refrigerators and latches and stuff like that all day long. I know practically nothing about software development. And so what I've learned to do, and it's very important to be able to do, is find good people and then just trust them to do the right things and make the right decisions and advise on how to move forward, and then try and get everyone kind of moving toward the same direction, moving toward a common objective. If you can't do that, then you will never grow beyond a small footprint. You've got to be able to find people around you that you can trust and rely on.
So let's transition a little bit from all the amazing stuff you've done, and let's dive into Chibo a little bit. As you said, there's lots of different ways you can teach an online class, but none of them out there are designed for online classes. You can do a Facebook Live private group and jump through a whole lot of hoops, and eventually you can teach a class through that. But Chibo was built from the ground up to be for cooks trying to teach other people. What features did you see missing from the other more generic platforms?
Yeah, I'll just talk about the pain that we experienced in successively smaller quantities until we got to something that really worked. The first thing we did was we actually got Google Hangouts Meet, and every platform's got its own little quirks. So the interesting thing about that platform is you can actually see on the side of the platform, you can see about 7 or 8 people just in this little pane of windows. You can see their video. And so here's the interesting thing we experienced. So we ran our first class or two on that platform because we didn't want to build a platform from the ground up if it wasn't necessary. And the biggest problem we had almost right out of the gate was you and I, we probably spend a lot of time in the professional world on video conferences, but a lot of people who are home cooks don't know how video conferencing software works. Now they do because COVID happened. But when we first started, no one even thought about muting their microphone. And because we were using Google Hangouts Meet, it didn't have the ability for the person who was hosting to mute their microphone.
That's always great. That scales well to 500 people.
Yeah, first few weeks we're like, this is not going to work. We tried Google Hangouts, we tried Zoom, we've tried Skype, we've tried Adobe Connect, we've tried, I can't remember all of the other ones that we've tried, but we've tried a lot of them. So that was the first issue we encountered. But so once we pretty much figured out after trying all those different platforms that there was no way we were going to be able to do this without building a proprietary platform from the ground up. We have the great benefit of having 2 full-time software developers who are super capable in web application and mobile application development, although we're only a web application right now for very important specific reasons, but who were able to really quickly stand up a prototype version of a piece of software that would allow us to experiment with different features. So there was that. Now, once we got beyond that and we were able to actually communicate back and forth, which in and of itself was a challenge, we started in the Louisville area. And the reason why we did that was everyone who joined, we wanted to be able to deploy someone to their house. We had a couple reasons. First of all, we thought, well, maybe we actually have to have the ingredients arrive on their doorstep because maybe they're not even going to be willing to go to the store to buy ingredients for this broadcast. But the real reason why we did that was we wanted someone at their house because we wanted them to just be watching and see what would happen. And one of the things we noticed really quickly was the person who's broadcasting, they're remote. So it's not like being all together in the same space. Like if you were taking a cooking class in a kitchen, as the instructor, you could really easily see someone who's struggling. You can't really do that, even with camera feedback. You can't really do that in this world. If someone is struggling and they, pop in and they say, I'm really, really struggling here, no one wants to do that in the first place because they feel like they're interrupting. So one night, I dispatched one of the team members to someone's home. And within the first 5 minutes, the person whose home he had gone to was so frustrated that she literally left the kitchen in tears because she was already a step or 2 behind. And what we realized very early on was that if you can't somehow have some way of feeding back what stage you're at, and giving people some specific information about what is going on, then they're going to get really, really frustrated. So we had to really implement 2 things. The first is what we try and do is we try and teach pacing, teach our new hosts to pace. That's something you're going to learn with practice. So you have to move slower. So we always say, hey, if this is going to be something you can cook in 30 minutes or 45 minutes, it's going to take you 60 minutes or an hour and a half. And some of our cookie decorators are really good examples of that. They'll show how to do something first and then they'll do it later. So they can say, hey, watch this, just watch now. And then you can do it along with me in a second. And that dramatically helps improve the experience. And the other thing that we do along those lines is we actually have a way for people to, the host, to add their ingredients that they can be viewed in the way that person wants to view them. So you can actually look at a navigation bar that shows all the ingredients and all the steps in order, or you can have a little bubble on the bottom of your window that says, here's this current step that the host is on. And then they can just tap through with the space bar, move to the next step so that you can always see the current step. One of the most common questions we would get is, how much salt did you want me to add again? And obviously no one in the audience gets a benefit from hearing for the second or third time how many tablespoons of salt to add.
Yep. It's definitely nice having the recipe steps so people can get exactly what they're looking for and what you're requiring of them at that moment. Unless you're like me and you forget to advance the steps occasionally.
Oh, that's a common thing. We've noticed though that people, it doesn't really matter. People still pull up the recipe navigation and get the information. As long as the information's there, they'll have access to it, and you won't get the questions about how many cups of flour to add. And that's an important thing. People want to be able to index back and forward, and that dramatically reduces the anxiety, because without that as a guide, they're left with only what they think they heard you say 30 seconds ago, and they get super frustrated. So it's really important to have a recipe navigation feature in there. I think the other thing that we do beyond just the application itself, the live experience itself, is we've learned a lot about how to communicate and the timing of communicating to people, how to prepare for an event like this. And if you're trying to do that by yourself, sometimes you might have to have multiple platforms that are capable of talking to each other. Many bloggers would have some of those things set up anyway. But what we try and do is make it so it's a single step. You post the event, and then all of the communication from the beginning to the end is of the experience is pre-timed and just automatically sent out for you.
What was a feature that you thought was probably a must-have feature that when you put it into a prototype you did, you're like, okay,
developer.
So people hate this.
Yeah, everything. So what we thought when we first started was we were going to have two-way audio and video stream simultaneously all the time for everyone. And that was an absolute necessity, because the person who's hosting needs to be able to see everyone's video. And we went to the extreme when we first started this of we wanted the people who were streaming from home. We thought it was so important that we designed some kind of devices that they could put their phone in so that they could always be seen by the host, or the host, they could turn it around and they could show the host what they were cooking. I don't want to minimize the importance of the visual, but we found that actually that amount of feedback coming to the host was distracting. So the host has a high cognitive load anyway, because they're trying to make sure that their teaching method is sound. And they're also, there's minimal management that you have to do of microphone cue and so forth, but they're kind of managing the whole experience. And on top of that, having to take in all this visual input from people is
trying not to light ourselves on fire.
Yeah. And it also turned out, and this was really counterintuitive, that a lot of people didn't want their video going back to the host. So most people, when we first started and they knew that that someone was going to be seeing inside their home, would spend a lot of time cleaning their kitchen beforehand. In my home, and probably many homes across the United States, you'd worry about like, what's my family currently wearing?
Yep.
Because the kitchen is like at the center of my home. I don't want them just running through the kitchen. And so it actually was creating a lot of anxiety on everybody's part to have all that in. And the other thing is streaming. Unfortunately, the state of the internet in the United States, broadband in the United States, is not where it needs to be. So there are some people who have fiber. There are some people who have, really strong connections that aren't fiber, but there's a lot of people who don't have great internet connections. And so managing all that upload and download at the same time is something that a lot of routers just can't handle. And so we actually dialed back and said, what if we were able to make this an awesome experience that people reported back having an excellent experience without any video feedback? What would happen if we created that? If that's possible, then we can always add the video feedback in later, and do it in a meaningful and thoughtful and curated manner, and make it an even better experience. But if we can figure it out without the video feedback from the people, then we'll be in great shape. About half of our hosts say, I appreciate not having had any of that video coming in because it's too much. About half of them say, I still want a little bit more. And so we are working on some features to make it possible for that. But it will be done in a much more thoughtful and curated manner than just having all of it just pushed at you.
I know on mine, I was glad not to have 30 other people's video up there, but occasionally it would have been nice, especially when we were plating dishes, to allow them to either share it with me or with the other people, because they were proud of what they had just put together and excited for people to see it.
Yeah, a lot of people get their fix on that just by posting to Instagram, and they're very satisfied. And that's actually a great place to post anyway, because that's where all of your friends can currently see it.
Yep. You did an initial test of the Chibo platform with, I think, like 5 to 10 bloggers once you started rolling out the first real version, I'll call it, after the prototypes. Was there any, can you share some dirt on a class or two that really showed some of the kinks in the system early on?
Trying to think of the best bad example. When we first started, we thought we were a studio. So honestly, we didn't even know we were a blogger platform when we first started. We weren't quite sure. What we were trying to do is just prove that you could have online interactive instruction where you have someone remotely and then people in their homes, which is something that no one's really done. So there was a lot of work to do on that. So we had hosts that we had found from the local area, and we thought, well, we're probably going to become some sort of a studio. So we had one night where we were kicked out of our normal space. We actually didn't even have a studio, right? So we were setting up wherever we could find a space that had a kitchen. And there was no space that had a kitchen every Thursday night, which is what we needed. So we were being moved from place to place. Well, there was one night where unexpectedly we were kicked out of the space that we were supposed to be. So we got moved to another space. And that other space, unfortunately, had a firewall or something that was installed. So like very little information was getting out. And so you had 10 people show up for a class. And this was when we were still pretty small. So we just had small numbers coming in, but you had 10 people show up for this class at home, and they can barely tell what's going on our side. And we definitely can't tell what's going on the other side. I will tell you this. We had live streaming is a challenging, like there's a lot of technology that's involved. And the internet still is a little rough. Like most people, 80 to 90% of people have an internet connection that can provide a pretty good experience, but everyone's gotten on Zoom and found that from time to time that their internet connection is not fast enough. So, now that's not a very specific story, but if you are there and you are experiencing a time when your internet connection is not fast enough, man, it can get rough. It can get very challenging. And that's one of the things that has taught us, is that our job up front, while we're still small, is to work very closely with the people who are hosting classes. So every time we bring a new host on, we always test with them in their internet, in their studio, to make sure that everything is working well. And then the first class, we show up 30 minutes in advance. We troubleshoot anything that could happen, make sure that they're ready to go on the platform, and then we stay with it the entire time to watch it and make sure everything's going well. So because we've experienced the pain of what can happen with technology, we try really hard to make sure we support people to make them not have that experience. My expectation is that over time, as I think just with COVID, like people are going to start having much more reliable internet. That's going to become an important thing. So that's going to help. And also with more experience and refinement of the platform, a lot of those things will be worked out to the point where we won't need to be as tied into it as we are, but we feel much better just being around, and our hosts feel better if we're around as well, because they know that if something happens, then we'll be there. And so now if something does happen, we usually get it fixed in 3 to 5 minutes, and then we're up and running and everyone's happy.
I've also found that with people doing a lot more, I assume, doing these Zoom calls, that they're a lot more lenient or forgiving. Like 6 months ago, I think people watched maybe some streaming television and like YouTube online, and like professionally produced things. And now they're on with their uncle whose internet's horrible. And so they're used to dealing with internet that's no longer like being broadcast from, ESPN satellites direct to their phones. And so I feel like they're a little more forgiving when there's a few hiccups.
I think that in general, people are moving more toward appreciation of live, imperfect content. Like there's always going to be a place for very high quality content, very high quality, high polish, highly edited content, no doubt about that. But I think people are also moving toward liking the authenticity and the connection they get from someone who's just being real. I think podcasts are a perfect example of that. Like the podcast is a form that allows people to be who they are in ways that never was possible. And that's like 90% of the content that I consume now is that type of long form content that you can actually learn about someone as opposed to find out like what if you see someone on a late night talk show, they're trying to hawk something, they're on there because they got the next movie coming up and they've got to act a part, their kind of public persona that they've created. And then you heard the same person on a podcast talking for 2 hours and you find out, oh, this is actually literally just a normal human being. And I think people like that. And that's what people like about joining these live classes is these people, they follow your blog. Like they think, I don't want to say they worship you, but they really think a lot of your opinion and the way you do things. And they think of you as a celebrity. And the fact that, or many people, you've done something to them that has changed their life, that has literally changed their life for the better. And so now it's $30 and I can cook along with you every single week or every single month. Like that's a no-brainer. I'm going to do that all the time because I thought that you were some sort of extra superhuman being. And you mean, what you've done means a lot to me. And there's really no way to get that level of interaction with someone other than what we're doing right now. So I think it's a powerful medium. And I think because people are so desperately, even before COVID, but certainly during COVID, feeling like they need that connection, I think it's going to be something that can grow for sure.
I think there's something really powerful too in inviting someone into your kitchen and cooking with them. And whether it's virtual or not, it's something that throughout history has meant a lot to people and is a way that we bond with the people around us, and to create a platform that makes it easier to do. I think, my fans that took my class really appreciated those moments we had, that they were in my kitchen with me and we were all cooking together.
Yeah, I think the thing that we missed when we first started this that we didn't understand was we were thinking, well, what if you could take cooking classes online? Well, cooking class, we don't really do, that's not really the main product we're offering. Yes, you do end up cooking something, but people aren't interested for the most part in learning how to become a French chef. Like there's some people. What people are really interested in is that the connection that they get with you. It drives them to do something that they otherwise probably wouldn't have done. So you can sit and watch content on Food Network all day long and it's good. It's enjoyable. I've done that before. Or you can join a class and cook along with someone and actually end up having produced something. And what I think people are trying to get is a sense of fulfillment. So, if you try to sell this thing as here's 8 courses that's going to turn you into a French chef, well, it doesn't matter who's providing the content and people aren't going to buy it. On the other hand, if you try and say, cook this thing along with me, the person that you've been following, that's what gets people interested in it. And they're not necessarily interested in the particular technique. They're interested in getting an end product that ends up being something that they thought might have been beyond their scope of achievement. And what's been gratifying about this is when we started building Chibo, we literally did not know if it would be possible to make something that would be a product that would be satisfying to people, that would be able to say, hey, I just made something that I didn't think I could make before. And we found out that we can do that at a pretty significant scale. And that's something that really matters.
There's a lot of talk in blogging in general about authenticity and being yourself, and how much do you open up to your fans. And I feel like this type of format is a great way for you to open up and really be yourself without necessarily sharing any more of your personal life than you feel comfortable with, but just that we're going to spend an hour and a half cooking, like your personality comes out, who you are comes out a lot more than a curated blog post or a hands, overhead shot, hands in the shot, tasty style video or something. You just can connect so much more.
Yeah, to the extent that you do that, you'll be more successful as well. A great example of that, one of my favorites that so we've got many people that I really enjoy. Joanne Molinaro, the Korean vegan, is a great example of just bringing like passion and joy and intimacy and a feeling of reality into her broadcasts. And she's grown a nice following of people who enjoy coming to her classes. I think a lot, I mean, the food's awesome, but I think a lot of it is just on the strength of people just like to be around that type of mojo. They enjoy that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true, is that your attitude, if you're upbeat and you're engaging, people are going to really relate to you. And as bloggers, how often do you have the chance to, like, a lot of the people at my class were new. A lot of them came from my mailing list and stuff, but some of them were new people, and they just spent an hour and a half with me as their first interaction. Like, that's a huge bond that you get with them. And one of the emails that I was most pleased with afterwards was someone sent me one saying, "Thanks for the class. A friend forwarded me the link, and I was really glad that I took it. And I've now since purchased 2 of your cookbooks so I can keep learning from you." Like, that's a very powerful first interaction with a new fan.
Yeah, I was actually shocked. One of the things that shocked me that I didn't believe, one of our first hosts, Lisa He of Borderlands Bakery, so I had a lot of skepticism about how much commitment people would put into this experience. So if you think about it, you're asking people to show up at a specific date and time. Sometimes because it's time zone specific, it's maybe an inconvenient time. And you're asking them to pay money, which is a lot of money. Like Netflix costs $12.99 and you're asking them to pay $30 to come to a class. So that's kind of a lot of money. And people do it. But then beyond that, how much additional commitment would people put in? So we wanted to do a cookie decorating class as a trial to see if people would engage in that type of content. Well, in order to do that, you need 2 additional things. You need to make the cookies the day before, which is another significant commitment. And then you need to also have all the colorings and sprinkles and usually some special cookie cutters. So in her first class, this was the first time we'd ever done this. She had people buy a kit of things that they needed specific to the class. She asked them to make all their cookies in advance so that all they were doing was putting the frosting on the cookies and decorating them. And the class sold out in an hour, and she was able to sell a bunch of other stuff on top of it. I think my theory is that people see these experiences as a reason to make an additional purchase, because they know that they're coming straight to the person that they trust, the expert, to get guidance on how to do something. So they think, okay, if I make this additional purchase, say it's a pasta class, if I purchase a $60 pasta machine, and I'm learning from Salty Seattle, who makes the best, most beautiful pasta I've ever seen on social, then I'm going to be able to use this pasta. Now I can have confidence in my purchase of the pasta machine because I'm going to know how to make it going forward. And so I think that's a big part of the power of the platform, is it draws people into not only the kind of main value unit is the event, but also a whole bunch of other things that could also create value for you as someone who's hosting a class.
You recently rolled it out to a larger group of food bloggers. I was honored to be a part of that. And some of my favorites, like Megan Porta and Kathy Hester, are involved, I know, in this rollout. What is the next step for Chibo?
Yeah, we still, so by the end of the year, our objective is to bring a total of 25 new people on board. And we have filled a lot of those spots, but we have some that are still open. So, I would encourage anyone who wants to apply. You can do that at chi.bo/apply, chi.bo/apply. I think the nut we're trying to crack now is how do we, now that we've got a great cooking experience, a great cook-along experience, We've got people who are making significant amounts of money running classes on a regular basis, bi-weekly, monthly basis. The question we're trying to answer now is, how do we take the experience we've created for food bloggers and content creators and make it an even more compelling value proposition? And so we've got some ideas there. I'm not going to talk too much about the specific ones, but what we're focused on is value creation for the food blogger themselves. And there are probably 5 to 10 different things that we're kind of working on. So we're moving into, I think, a period that will do a lot of exploration and experimentation around new feature launches and so forth that I think are going to be exciting for people who join now. I don't know when we'll open up to a larger group of people. There's a possibility that we, by the end of the year, will be kind of sticking with the group of people that are on board for the time being, and then helping them continue to develop. So if this is something that you're interested in, I would encourage you to reach out to us very soon. I don't want to discourage someone who listens to this in a month or two from reaching out to us. We'll do the best we can to accommodate people. But we are really we're working in a very dedicated manner with the people we bring on right now to make sure that we're doing a good job of serving their particular needs and helping them grow their businesses in particular.
Well, I've had an enjoyable experience doing my Chibo class. I'm looking forward to getting off my butt and scheduling the next few that I need to get on my calendar before Abby and David yell at me too much for slacking off there. They're good at cracking the whip. So I definitely recommend, if any food bloggers are out there interested in exploring, live classes in general are amazing. And if you can get yourself involved in the Chibo platform, I've really enjoyed my experience. I know a lot of the people that I know that have done it have enjoyed it as well. Taylor, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your expertise, talking about everything Chibo is doing. If people want more information about Chibo, they can check out cookwithchibo.com. Check out some of the events there, see the type of stuff they're doing. I recommend Kathy Hester's upcoming vegan Halloween dinner or her Harry Potter Halloween party. She's doing both of those, and I know she always does an amazing job. So you can check those out, or they can email you at taylor.dawson@geappliances.com. Is that right?
That's correct. I look forward to hearing from people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your expertise, and connecting with my audience. It means a lot to me.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
And thanks, everyone, for listening. I'm Jason Logston. This has been Makin Bacon, all about helping you serve your fans, grow your income, and get the most out of your blog. Until next time, I'm Jason.